If you want the easiest and most effective method for quitting porn and mastering your sexuality, you're going to want to do what is commonly and somewhat ironically referred to as a hard mode reboot. And I say it's ironic because this is actually the best way to do this. And it's actually the easiest. So a hard mode reboot is basically a period of total abstinence from all sexual activity, meaning no porn, no masturbation, no sex, no enjoying any sort of sexual imagery or other forms of sexual stimulation for a period of 90 days. And there are a few cases where hard mode is not the right fit for guys, which I'll get to later in this video, but for the vast majority of you, okay, it's going to, doing this hard mode reboot is going to allow you to kick porn permanently out of your life quickly and simply as possible, while also allowing you to unlock an entirely new level of masculine self-mastery. Hi, my name is Mark Queppin, and I help men who are haunted by their unmet potential master their habits and implement a lifestyle of pure devotion to their highest goals in 28 days without brute force willpower. And while I now focus on holistic masculine development, I am also a former porn addict who quit porn and has stayed clean since 2013. And during this time, I've helped literally thousands of men from all around the world quit porn through my coaching and online programs. And in this episode of my Porn Free Path series, I'm going to be explaining what reboot is, why a hard mode reboot is best, what's allowed, what's not, and who should not do the hard mode approach. Now, before we get into it, if you're looking for a full-fledged self-discipline system that will not only let you quit porn, but also take full command of your life at the same time, I'd recommend that you watch the free training in the description where I introduce you to the Frontline Man system that I use every single day to help men achieve incredible habit and lifestyle transformations. Okay, so enough of this intro stuff. Let's get into it, all right? And if you've already looked at some porn recovery material, then you're probably familiar with the idea of a porn reboot. But in case you aren't, let me quickly break down this concept because it's really pretty simple, okay? Start here, all right? Porn is compelling to us because the primal limbic part of the brain that controls our neurochemicals isn't smart enough to understand that when you're using porn, you're just looking at pixels on a screen. Instead, when it sees the naked and inviting woman, this part of your brain basically thinks it's experiencing a real reproductive opportunity. And because of that, it responds in kind and gets really excited. But the problem is that porn is way different than real sex and what you consider, you could call it like an unnatural hyperstimulus. And it's unnatural because in just a few minutes of scrolling through a porn site, this primal part of your brain can be exposed to more quote unquote potential mates than our hunter-gatherer ancestors would have seen in literally like their entire lifetimes. So like, your brain's not adapted to this. And so this overload of sexy imagery triggers an extreme response of pleasure in the brain, characterized by a massive release of dopamine, a neurochemical of anticipation and pleasure. In fact, the level of dopamine that is released can be compared to how your brain responds to cocaine. And so this massive level of stimulation is why we call it a hyperstimulus, okay? And similar to cocaine, if you get hooked on this high and through repeatedly nuking your brain with all this easy pleasure, it can lead to a massive cascade of negative neurochemical, psychological, behavioral, and sexual, and even relational issues in your life. And I get into way more detail about this in the first episode of this series, so you can check that out. All right, but basically, it screws you up. And if you're trying to quit porn, you probably already understand this on some level, okay? But what do you want to do? What do we got to do about this then? Well, the high-level solution is to go through a process that is commonly referred to as a porn reboot. And the idea is that if you can go 90 or so days without using porn, this kind of acts as like a factory reset for your brain, returning it to a more natural state where you can live more happy, connected, and productive. Now, while quitting porn might be the primary goal in all of this, I would encourage you to think a little bit bigger because it's actually going to really help you out. So instead of just being like, the goal is to quit porn, all right? It's like, you also want to be developing true sexual self-mastery, all right? You don't want to just, cut the porn out of your life, but you want to be able to gain the power of being able to act only on the sexual desires that truly align with your highest morals and goals. That's what sexual self-mastery is. It's like I only let my sexuality be expressed in ways that I feel genuinely good about. And most guys, they do not have this at all, and it causes all other kinds of life issues. So if you're on board with this, what I'm going to do now is break down the rules that you need to follow in your reboot that will give you the best chance at properly rebooting your brain, leaving porn behind you for good, and developing true control over your sexual energy. And this is where the hard mode concept comes into play. Okay, so let's break this down. There are a few variables that you need to be considered when setting up your reboot. All right, there's sexual imagery, porn is obviously that, but it also includes, anything else that might turn you on when you look at it. There's masturbation, okay? And then there's sexual activity with a real person, okay? So the aforementioned hard mode reboot is to simply cut out all of these things, no sexual imagery, no masturbation, no sex, or, hooking up with people, doing other kinds of things, okay? Just none of it, everything off the table, easy peasy. Well, not easy peasy, but simple at least, okay? And the reason why you would want to do this is pretty straightforward. By completely turning off all sexual activity for this 90-day chunk, your brain is going to have the best chance at rewiring itself from porn and reverting to a healthier and more natural state. Because if you keep some of that stuff in, well, you're still going to be pumping energy through those neural pathways. And the problem is if you're doing that, well, then it's not really resetting. It's not really getting that chance to rest and return to like the way it's supposed to be. So, and also it makes it a lot harder to do. So beyond this, all right, beyond just giving you the best rebooting scenario, it's also going to give you an opportunity to learn how to be present with and actually hold your sexual energy. So many guys have the weak and unmasculine mentality that they just need to get rid of their own sexual charges. Like, that's often what guys, how they talk when they talk about jerking off. It's like, I just got to get it out. Just got to get it out, right? And I just see that as such a low-level way to interact with your own sexuality. Like it's something that you need to distance yourself from. You need to run away from it, all right? And, my whole deal here is helping guys become what I call frontline men, right? And this is about mastering your sexual energy, learning how to direct it towards your goals, and instead of being a slave to it, okay? And while this might sound logical on paper, the reality is that many guys are highly resistant to this hard mode abstinence idea. So like for the porn addict, a life without any sexual stimulation can seem like a hellish existence to be avoided at all costs. And as someone who has personally felt that way very strongly for a large chunk of my life, let me just tell you, I understand where you're coming from, okay? Like the idea of not getting any sexual stimulation can be pretty freaky sounding at first. And it's due to this resistance that there's a tendency to try not hard mode, but some form of softer reboot, where you still allow yourself to experience some sexual stimulation in one form or another. However, my hope here is to convince you that this is actually a really bad idea. And the reason for this is, frankly, just because like in the decade plus of helping guys with this issue, I don't think I've once seen a guy who was like sincerely hooked on porn successfully quit for any extended period without doing at least some stint of hard mode. Okay, I'm sure you can find someone on a forum somewhere who says they did it, but it's like, how long have they been without it? How many relapses have they had in there? It gets a little iffy. Every case where I've seen a guy really kind of permanently leave porn behind, they've always done hard mode. Okay. So that's, over a decade of experience. I've worked with a lot of guys. So it's just take that for what you will. But anyway, one of the things that guys need to do then is they need to kind of wrap their head around, why am I doing this hard mode thing? This seems really hard. And so what I want to do is walk through each of these pieces of the hard mode reboot and give you a rationale as to why we're cutting each of these out. And this can be really helpful because it lets you speak to yourself. It gives you that reason, right? Because when you can't convince yourself of something, it's very difficult to get yourself to follow through. So I'm trying to give you some real powerful mental, psychological ammunition here. So we'll kick things off with the big one, okay? And this is going to be hard to hear for many of you, but if you're trying to quit porn and you don't give up masturbation, it's just not going to work out. In fact, continuing to try to keep masturbation around is one of the very biggest reasons some guys perpetually relapse and stay hooked on porn. I can't tell you the number of guys who I've worked with who were trying for years to quit porn, but they never once tried to give up masturbation, all right? There's definitely something to this, all right? And I get the resistance. There's like this massive psyop out there that masturbation is normal and healthy. And because of this, most guys have been doing it since early adolescence. In fact, many guys view jerking off to be as much of their routine as brushing their teeth or taking a shower. But once you quit jerking off, you realize it's actually something that's, frankly, in my opinion, weird as hell, and you don't need to do it at all. I mean, you're basically just tricking your brain into thinking that you're having sex by turning your hand into a fake vagina and then imagining that it's a vigorous lover so that you can, induce an artificial orgasm. Okay. And if you want to argue for your right to masturbate or the morality of it or whatever, okay, like go do that somewhere else. That's not what I'm talking about. This is about for people who actually want to quit porn and take control over their sexuality. If you want to do that, you got to stop jerking off. So why? Why do you need to cut out masturbation? Well, the first thing, and this applies to really any orgasm, but it's the thing that's been dubbed the chaser effect. Okay. And this is when you orgasm and over the next couple of days, you will have much more intense sexual cravings. Okay. It's kind of like your brain got a taste of sexual pleasure and then it wants more. Okay. And so this chaser effect can be triggered by actual sex, wet dreams even, but most commonly it's caused by masturbation. A guy will be like, oh, I'm just going to jerk off real quick and I'm not going to watch any porn. And then, either later that day or the next day or the next day, he's going to have big cravings hit him. And he's kind of already greased the gears in his mind, as it were, and typically he relapses. So here's another reason why you're going to want to quit the masturbation. And this is because masturbation without porn tends to get boring very quickly. And if you're someone who's hooked on porn, then there's a good chance that you've learned how to cope with the challenges of your life by using that reliable hyper-stimulated orgasm, okay, that porn can offer you. And so when you take the porn out of the equation, that hyper-stimulated orgasm is now just a normal orgasm, and you might need to, work up a sweat to get it, and it's just not going to hit as hard. And so it's not going to offer the same coping effect in your life. So as long as you still have masturbation as kind of like this, adult security blanket that you get a run to every time you're stressed, you're worried, you're lonely, bored, and horny, then, you're going to keep trying to do that. But if you take it completely out of the picture, then you're forced to actually learn healthier methods of interacting with the challenges in your life. Now, some guys might counter by saying, well, no, masturbation without porn doesn't get boring. I just fantasize. And fantasizing is its own issue, okay? Because there's two big problems with sexual fantasizing, particularly when coupled with masturbation, okay? And the first is that you're pretty much just making mental porn, which activates a similar, if not the exact same sexual pathways that you're trying to turn off and reboot to begin with. And secondly, it actually trains your brain to reflexively produce sexual imagery, all right? And this is a problem. It's there's even a term out there where guys call it they're walking through the world or they're scrolling online and they see someone really attractive and they take a mental snapshot and they add it to their spank bank, they call it. Basically this log of mental images that they use to excite themselves. And this can become a problem in its, self. So I've actually worked with a number of guys who weren't addicted to porn and they were just addicted to jerking off to their own fantasies. And the main downstream effects of this, beyond it being, kind of weird in my opinion, is that every single time then that they see a pretty woman or they simply just get bored, stressed, or lonely, they compulsively start creating porn scenes, sexual imagery, and stuff like that in their head. And one, this is horribly distracting, okay, which really cuts down on your ability to be productive and focus. But it's really also terrible if you ever have an intention to cultivate real romantic connection with a woman, because it's extremely difficult to be vibed in and present with a girl if your mind is playing out some kind of sexual scenario that you've just, imagined up. So then at this point, guys will be like, all right, well, I'm going to do healthy masturbation. No porn, no fantasy, just pure feeling, man. I'm going to make love to myself. And it's okay. Well, here's the thing. That just doesn't happen because, again, that's going to be the most boring version of it. And typically, instead of just, leading to a guy just not masturbating that much, they're just going to end up just escalating, okay? They just get frustrated and then they start letting some fantasy in, or they, scroll something or whatever. It's it just starts this slippery slope cascade that almost always ends up back at some sort of porn usage. Now, I know even after saying all this, there's gonna be some guys out there who are just gonna be like, oh, but man, come on. Isn't there some way I could still have masturbation in my life and quit porn? And the answer is theoretically, yes. I'm a big believer in the power of our brain's neuroplasticity to really learn and adapt to anything. But here's the thing. It's going to cost a tremendous amount of energy and effort for you to truly separate these two behaviors in your mind. And honestly, the easiest way to do it would probably do a hard mode reboot first, but that's besides the point. Is that if you're going to have to invest a ton of energy anyway to decouple porn and masturbation, this chocolate and peanut butter of sexual addiction, why not just go all the way? Do the hard mode reboot and learn how to actually hold your sexual charge and transmute it. Okay. It's like the reality that I want to make crystal clear to you is that after you go through this period of adaptation that hard mode demands of you, you're going to be totally fine not getting off all the time or even at all. You might have a few wet dreams and maybe some blue balls here and there, but eventually your sexual continence muscles will strengthen and it simply becomes normal. Okay. And you don't lose your sexuality. You don't lose your ability to perform sexually. You don't stop getting boners. Okay. You just don't feel the need to crank your hog in order to get relief all the time. Okay. And this means that you learn how to be present with this sexual energy, which you can then, learn how to transmute, which I've already got some videos on. I got more videos planned. Or you can use that sexual energy for what it's intended for and let it drive you to go connect with a wonderful woman and, get married, build a family, all that good stuff. Okay. And the payoff down the line of developing this sexual self-mastery really does help that relationship piece, because beyond just not having all the issues that porn will cause, it'll also mean that a woman cannot control you with sex. Because if you go on 90 days without getting off, this ain't going to kill me. All right. If you don't masturbate all the time, then that if, a girl gets mad at you, you don't need to go simp for her so that she'll still let you have sex with her. Instead, you can stay in frame. You can stay on point with who you want to be. And you don't need to engage in any of that power struggle stuff, because it's you don't want to sleep with me? All right, I'm fine. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to treat you the way that I believe is best. If you got a problem with that, you're going to go, that's okay. I don't need to sleep with you. And that is incredibly freeing and incredibly powerful. All right, so that's enough on masturbation. Hopefully I sold you on it. And the next thing we're going to talk about now is cutting out the intentional viewing of any sexual material, even if it's not explicitly porn. Okay, even if it's just softcore stuff or bikini stuff or just, ogling pretty women. Okay. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean you need to hide from pretty women or be afraid of them or never watch a show that has someone attractive in it. But the thing you want to focus in on is that sexual stimulation shouldn't ever be the main reason that you're doing something, at least not during this reboot period. If you're in a dating scenario post 90 days, whatever, that's something different. I'm talking about while you're in the hard mode reboot, don't do anything if the main reason you're doing it is for sexual stimulation. And the way that you can tell that is if there was no sexual stimulation involved, would I still be doing it? It's pretty simple, right? If you're watching a movie and you'd watch that movie with or without that attractive, female lead in it, then go ahead and watch the movie. But if you're there just to watch her, that's the problem. Okay. We want to avoid that. So why do we do this? Well, on the surface, it should be pretty obvious. Okay. It's we're trying to avoid activating these sexual circuits so that they can reboot, right? And you also don't want to increase your cravings and increase your chances of relapse, right? Because maybe you just get hit with a craving too hard because you're, scrolling too much stuff and then, whatever, you fall off, right? And a lot of guys, they mess this up because they think, oh, well, if I'm looking at something that's not quite porn, it's okay. But in reality, if you've got a porn problem, you're an addict, right? You're addicted to this stuff. It's like an alcoholic saying yeah, I haven't touched whiskey in weeks. And there they are, pounding a 6-pack of beer. Okay. It's oh, it's just beer, man. It's okay, but you're still using your drug. Okay. It's the same drug. And we want to quit that drug of pursuing inauthentic self-gratification, particularly through inauthentic and immoral means. So like I said, stop watching movies and shows, particularly because there's someone hot in them. Stop checking out a girl's profile online because you hope to see some yoga pants pics or beach pics, okay? If a girl is fully clothed and the main reason you're looking at her is you want to get that hit, you're checking her out, you're following her down the grocery aisle, whatever it is that you're doing, stop doing that, okay? You're using like an addict, Okay. And you don't need to be perfect with this stuff. Okay. You don't need to be batting 1,000 with these smaller instances. But the big part you want to key into is learn how to remove the permission to do this. Because a lot of guys, they allow themselves. They're like, oh, I'm allowed to do this. This is something I want to do. I'm going to consciously choose to do this. And that's actually a big part of this whole recovery mechanism. We have to learn how to remove that permission to ourselves. Because if you give yourself permission to do that, it's a very slippery slope back to porn. Okay. So if you practice it in little ways, even if you're not perfect with it, it's going to make a huge difference when it comes to quitting porn. It's kind of like moving the battle line. It's like if your battle line is right at porn, well, if you lose that battle, you're going to definitely relapse. Okay. But if we move that battle all the way up here to how we control our eyes in general, well, you could still even lose some battles, but you're going to be far away from, relapsing to porn. Now, there's one more thing that I got to bring up here around this sexual imagery stuff, okay? Because there's a sneaky way that many guys try to view sexual material where they're kind of lying to themselves. And I call this fishing. All right, this is where you engage in an activity that isn't overtly sexual, okay? But it includes a good chance that you'll eventually come across something sexy and exciting. Okay. And I call this fishing because it's kind of like you're dropping your attention into some stream until you land a big fish of sexual dopamine. So what is fishing and how do guys do it? Well, a simple way that many guys do this is by going on some algorithmically generated feed, like the Instagram Explore page, maybe mindlessly wandering through YouTube, surfing Reddit, scrolling Twitter, this kind of stuff. And eventually, especially if your past clicking behavior and people you have followed or whatever includes sexual material, the algorithm is most likely going to serve you up something sexually stimulating at some point. And the guys kind of play a little game with themselves. So they're like, oh, I'm not doing anything bad. I'm just scrolling Instagram. It's not porn. But eventually, they find themselves zombie swiping through pages of OnlyFans models until they relapse. Or it's like, oh, I'm just scrolling Twitter trying to get the news. I don't know if there's going to be any boobs that come up. And it's like, yes, you do. Especially with who you're following, right? It's like, you got to know where your traps are. And there's ways that you can curate your feeds so that you can still use them in some form or another. But frankly, one of the ones you really want to stay away from is the Instagram Explore page, because you click on boobs once, you're going to be getting a ton of them. And sometimes you just get them, I think, because Instagram knows you're a male, and then they'll just serve it up to you. So you got to watch out for that kind of stuff. But this isn't just social media, okay? It can be with specific shows where you know that it's likely to have a sex scene is going to happen, or, that they tend to bring hot girls on. Or for some guys, it's even a matter of like going to specific places, right? Like some guys I know, they'll go to certain coffee shops because they know hot college girls like to go there. Again, I'm not saying you can't do any of this stuff. I'm not saying you can't use any social media or you can't go to coffee shops or you can't watch movies, okay? If they're consistently a problem, you might need to cut them out. But like as far as a blanket rule, it's not a hard one. It's more of a personal one. You're going to have to judge from your own experiences. But the big thing that I want to stress is, like I said, it's about the intention. All right. If you're traveling cross town to a particular coffee shop instead of the one right next door because they've got that hot barista who wears ridiculous yoga pants, don't do it. You're just using. Okay. You got to be honest with yourself. Stop lying and cut all that stuff out. And frankly, it's beneath your dignity anyway. So now that we've covered no masturbation, no sexual material, now we're going to talk about the big one. Okay. And for some guys, this one seems really hard. And this is the idea of no sexual activity during the reboot. Okay. And there are some caveats to this, which I'll get to shortly. First is obviously the chaser effect, which we already mentioned. Okay. I can't tell you how many times a guy has relapsed the day after having sex because he basically prematurely turned his sexual systems back on to have sex, but those sexual systems, they weren't rebooted yet. And then, the next day he was hit with those chaser effect cravings and he relapses. Okay. But it goes deeper than that. All right. Back when I was first helping guys quit porn, there was this idea that you needed to replace porn with real sex to recondition your brain away from porn and to the real thing. Okay. And at a high level, that's not really a terrible idea if done properly in a proper moral way, in my opinion. In fact, that's probably what many of you want to do. You want to get your sexuality unhooked from porn, tied back into the real thing. Okay. But the problem is the timeline. When you're coming off of porn, it's extremely difficult to have authentic sex with someone. Okay. And what ends up really happening is that instead of this intimate connection, a porn brain guy basically just ends up masturbating with someone else's body, the body of his partner. And in some instances, this involves needing to literally think about porn during sex or alter their viewing angle so they can watch themselves having sex as if they were watching porn. Heck, I've even heard of some guys needing to watch porn while having sex in order to stay hard. And this can be legitimately heartbreaking. I literally just got a DM from a woman, and this is one of hundreds of these kinds of DMs where she was saying oh, my husband's a porn addict, and without me knowing it, apparently he's been forcing me to do all this fetish kink stuff that he's into, and now I feel totally gross and demeaned because I realized that he was basically just turning me into porn for him. And this kind of stuff will literally cause divorces. Okay, this really hurts the majority of women, and I just think it's messed up to bring someone into this sort of situation. And I think all the guys who follow me, or at least I hope all the guys who follow me, they want to be better than that. All right. They don't want, when they recognize they got an issue with their sexuality, they want to clean it up first before bringing someone in. It's kind of just like, if your house is a wreck, you don't host a dinner party, right? You clean the house up first, then you host the dinner party. That's what I'm recommending here. Otherwise, you're going to run into some serious problems. And I think it's really just not fair to that person or to you, because you both deserve better. So really, stay away from anything second base and beyond. Okay, just focus on holding hands, cuddling, building intimacy the old-fashioned way for 90 days. And then afterward, you're going to be able to reconnect so much better, so much more authentically. You're going to be able to be so much more present. Okay, give yourself the opportunity to truly get a handle on your sexuality before you start sharing it again with someone. And so this is pretty easy if you're single. Just work on yourself for 3 months, complete your reboot, and then, go out and date and do that kind of thing. Or, work on yourself and date, but just don't sleep with anyone. Just don't push things too fast. Okay. And if you're in a relationship or you're married, okay, this might require a bit of a hard conversation where you let them know, hey, we're not going to be having sex for a while. If you're in a dead bedroom, it kind of makes it easier, but say you're not, then yeah, you're probably going to need to communicate this to your partner. And this can be hard, but you might not be able to quit without doing this. In fact, you probably won't. And I actually got an older video called Quitting Porn While in a Relationship, where I give you some tips on how to maybe do this with your partner. Now, this relationship piece is where it gets into the scenario of who shouldn't do hard mode, or where hard mode is maybe the wrong idea. And this I've found to be particularly important for guys who are married and they've already put their partner through a significant period of hard mode abstinence. Because what I was seeing was that guys would do hard mode. Okay. They would not have sex with their wife for a long period, but then maybe, prior to 50 days, something like that, he would maybe have a relapse. Okay. And then he would be like, shoot, I got to start over. And then he would extend. Okay. Sorry, wife. I got to do another 90 days without sex. And some guys who weren't really working the system well and they weren't getting the results, they kind of just started pushing this abstinence period from their wife way too far, 6 months to a year, sometimes even more. And frankly, I just don't think that's good for a marriage, good for the wife, or good for the guy trying to quit porn. I believe marriage is a sacred thing that's, fundamentally, built on the sexual connection, and just going way too long without that, I just don't think it's a good thing. So how do you handle this? Well, I think every guy owes it to himself to have the hard mode experience at least once. Okay, every guy deserves to know what a properly calibrated sexuality feels like, and he needs to know that he doesn't need to get off to be okay. So if you go through 90 days at least once, or at least almost once, maybe one or two slips in there, and you put your wife through that 90 days or whatever, that's enough, probably. Okay, and if you relapse again, maybe you just need 1 or 2 or up to maybe 4 weeks of hard mode again if you really need to set yourself back up again. A lot of times you don't even need that. Sometimes you can just cut out all the other stuff, cut out the porn, cut out the sexual viewing, and still have sex with your partner, assuming you've already done, at least some significant period of hard mode for yourself, okay? Because at that point, that married sex, it's just important, it's powerful, it's very natural, and that will help with your rewiring, assuming you've done the reboot already. So just putting that out there for all you guys who feel like, oh shoot, if I don't do this right, I'm going to need to not have sex for a year for my wife. She's going to get so pissed. We're like, okay, you don't need to be like that. So just giving you permission there. So I'm going to wrap this up with some important encouragement. Okay. I know hard mode sounds difficult, but it's just because it's outside your norm. Frankly, it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable for certain periods, but it lets you achieve the life-changing benefits of quitting porn, and it's way beyond worth it because of the sexual self-mastery that it brings, all right? If it just let you quit porn alone, that'd already be worth it. But the fact that you learn how to really, it's going to put you in a position at least to really learn how to master your sexual energy, it's even more worth it, okay? And if you want to pull this off, the key is you just got to submit to the idea. Surrender to it. Don't try and force yourself into it. Relax into it. Let the idea wash over you, okay? You don't need to fight it. It's we're letting something go here for a period. And ultimately, so you can have a much better relationship with it. And if you've got a lot of fear and anxiety around this, well, there's a good chance you'd greatly benefit from my full program where I deeply get into how to process all these internal conflicts. So if you'd like to learn more about my full system for quitting porn through living your best life, then check out the free training I put in the description to learn more. All right. And if you've enjoyed this, please please subscribe, turn on notifications and all that jazz. Okay. Would love to hear your comments as well. See you guys in the next one. Ooh, yeah.